on the rights and welfare of the child also encourages child participation in decision-making processes, particularly legal, social, and family matters. Specifically, Article 7 states that every child who is capable of communicating his or her views shall be assured the right to express his opinions freely in all matters and to disseminate his opinions subject to such restrictions as are prescribed by the law. We also see other frameworks and other legal provisions mirroring this in the East Africa Community Child Policy. We also see a provision for child participation in line with age, disability, or you could say capability and maturity of the child. And when it comes home to Uganda, we see that while our constitution does not explicitly mention child participation, it's implied in many other ways. The Children's Act as amended and the National Child Participation Strategy both reflect a national commitment to promoting child participation. Our national strategy on child participation provides a framework for engaging children at all levels. This includes participation in child-led initiatives and spaces created by adults for purposes of allowing children the opportunity to voice their views in decision-making. Nevertheless, we see that barriers still exist, barriers to child participation. Barriers such as poverty, some cultural norms, and lack of access to resources to actualize this participation of children. Today, we are excited to speak about a tension that is inherent in our work, even as we implement child protection initiatives. We see children presented in various frameworks as passive beings to be protected, to be provided for. And on the other hand, we see children presented as active agents in matters that affect them. Today's conversation will address that tension, and we hope that we'll all learn a thing or two and share our experiences about child participation. And at the end of the day, we'll all become advocates of child participation in the different spaces in which we operate. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today. If we could have the bio up. Our first speaker is Dr. Fasil Mulatu Kesese. He's an assistant professor of international law and human rights at Addis Ababa University, College of Law and Governance, Center for Human Rights, where he also serves as the head of the center. He's the lead coordinator of the STRACE project at the center, which has been implemented in collaboration with the Embassy of Sweden to support human rights teaching, research, and community development at the Center for Human Rights. Dr. Fasil holds a master's degree in law, a doctorate in law from the University of Western Cape, Faculty of Law, a master's degree in law in human rights democratization from the University of Pretoria. He has written several academic and non-academic pieces on the rights of children, refugees, migrants, internally displaced persons, among other topics. Dr. Fasil has also been a visiting scholar at the University of Antwerp, University of Graz, and University of Lund. Additionally, he has worked with the World Bank Group, UNICEF, International Labour Organization, and many others. Currently, he works with the AfriChild Center as well as a research associate, leading our work on early childhood development in Bambasi refugee settlement. It's our pleasure to have Dr. Fasil Mulatu speak to us today about his experience, his learnings and findings from some of his work on child participation in child protection initiatives. Let's welcome him. Over to you, Dr. Fasil.
Okay, Claire, thank you very much for that generous introduction. Greetings to all participants and also panelists. I'm very much delighted and honored to be before you to make a brief presentation on the topic related to child participation. Before I begin, let me share my slide with you. Is it visible?
Yes, it is. If you could put in slideshow, in presentation
Okay.
mode.
All right, I will do that. Thank you. So my presentation would generally revolve around child participation, but we'll take a child rights perspective and a few insights from Ethiopia. Of course, this is a broad topic, and it may take almost a whole course to cover every detail, but I'll try to highlight some important points in the limited time that I'm allocated with. So my presentation will cover three main areas. One, as a background, it talks about theories of child rights, followed by a normative discussion on child participation and practical insights from Ethiopia. As a background, before the United Nations Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child was adopted in 1989, there were a number of efforts to protect children from different ill treatments, abuse, exploitation. And also there were efforts to come up with a standard for the protection of children. Particularly most initiatives or engagements to come up with a normative law somehow or a normative standard somehow relate with the then problem. For instance, in the 19th century, industrialization put many children to be faced with exploitation, labor exploitation. Afterwards, the First World War also created a very dire situation for many children, which also necessitated the design of Declaration on Child Rights in 1924 and subsequently in 1959 as well. There were some efforts to codify or to integrate the different child rights issues or norms, but finally it became successful in 1989. Of course, it wasn't an easy journey, and still is a long way is needed before we realize the rights of children. But still, as Hansen critically provided, there's no universally accepted agreement on the component, the overall extent, priorities, and even definition of children's rights. Of course, other experts, contrary to his argument, argue that in principle, children's rights can be regarded as having some form of universal acceptance by citing a universal acceptance or adoption, ratification of the UNCRC by many countries except two countries. I'll come back to that. So proposing this disagreement on the universality, then he proposes 4 schools of thought on child rights. The first is paternalism, the second is liberalism, welfarism, and emancipation. Of course, other theorists somehow categorize schools of thoughts on child rights into protectionist and liberationist theories or schools. Of course, this is some of his proposals as to the 4 schools can be broadly categorized into 2, but his 4 categories appear to give a nuanced understanding of the different schools. So for paternalism theories, children are in the process of being developed, incomplete, and they need to be protected by others, by parents, by relatives, other adults or even institutions. This notion is anchored on the principle that children are in the process of development, and they are dependent, and they are incompetent to make rational decisions. On the contrary, liberationist theorists contend that children are independent and actual citizens who needs to be treated par with adults. They can make rational decisions, and they deserve a right to autonomy. So this is somehow an extreme position to paternalism schools. The other school is the school welfare approach. So this is try to understand children in terms of growth, maturity, and process. And they assert that children are in the process of development, which is generally regarded as becoming. And when they show capability, growth, and maturity, they should be regarded as deserving some form of autonomy and regarded as being. So in terms of child rights, they see the three dimensions of rights being given in terms of priority into protection rights, provision rights, and participation rights. As you may know, protection, different categories rights can be categorized based on need, importance, and applicability to certain groups. So protection rights somehow refer to those rights to be protected from abuse, exploitation, and ensuring the well-being and safety of children. Provision rights are somehow impose a positive duty and proactive engagement of the state and others involved, which includes right to education, health, and other categories. And participation rights refer to rights somehow that would engage the involvement of children in various capacities, such as expression of views, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and the like. So the emancipation, on the other hand, somehow is the opposite of the welfare dimension, and it gives primacy to being unless children prove to the contrary. So children should be regarded as having competency to engage, maturity to engage, unless they prove the opposite. Yeah? So being is given primacy, and if that cannot be proven, then they can be provided with different support. So in terms of hierarchy of rights, the emancipation school gives priority to participation rights, then followed by provision and protection. In the current context, theorists somehow argue that the UNCRC, as well as the African counterpart, is anchored on the two schools, the welfare as well as the emancipation. So children of a younger age somehow needs protection rights as a priority, provision right as a priority, and then as they grow or mature, then they should be granted participation rights. Even the participation rights can be granted by taking into account their age and maturity, as the CRC provides. So these two approaches or schools generally informed the CRC and how the CRC and then the other child rights protection regimes are interpreted and applied. So if we establish that somehow the school which informs the international dimension Then let's just highlight a few points from the CRC and ACRWC's perspective, because the perspective that I plan to take is the rights dimension. So the UNCRC, after a long period of progress, was adopted in 1989. It is regarded as the widely ratified instrument to date, except US and Somalia. All other nations in different capacity accepted or acceded to the instrument. Even compared to the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, which is the instrument, the African counterpart. African countries tend to ratify the CRC more than the ACRWC. Of course, the rationale behind coming up with the African specific convention is because to provide a tailored kind of protection by giving account to the regional peculiarities. So following the UNCRC, the ACRWC was also approved, adopted in 1990. So one peculiar character of the UNCRC is it incorporates both the civil and political right dimension as well as the economic, social, cultural rights. Previously, that could not be achieved because of ideological differences between the West and the East, which also produced two covenants, human rights covenants globally, the civil and political rights covenant and the economic, social, cultural covenant, because an agreement could not be reached during the negotiation in the 1960s. But regarding children, that was somehow resolved, and in a single convention, the two classifications of rights, broadly classification of rights, got their way. So there are a number of substantive rights, from the right to name, nationality, and birth registration to protection of children in difficult circumstances and situations. Socioeconomic rights are also recognized, as you might see from the list. Due to time, I'm not going to go in detail. So it is a self-standing, comprehensive outline of different rights of children in a single document. The African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child more or less has similar provisions as to the CRC, but there are some differences. Of course, the primary addition, by taking into account the peculiar characteristics of African children and African society, is the inclusion of duties of the child under Article 31. Children in Africa do not only have rights, but also responsibility towards their family, towards their society, towards their parents, and even to other Africans, as well as preserving the African cultural values. This is an important and unique outlining of rights in the context of Africa. Of course, there are other provisions which provides tailored kind of protection. For instance, in the context of non-discrimination, in the context of expression of children's views, the protection of children from harmful traditional practices. So they are unique kind of framing of the rights based on African peculiar problems and characteristics of children. So respect for the views of the child. Article 12 of the CRC, as well as Article 4, sub 2, from the perspective of the best interest of the child, under the ACRWC, provides for this right. And it's not only a right, but it's also a guiding principle. According to the UNCRC, there are 4 guiding principles of child rights. These 4 guiding principles should somehow inform and influence the implementation, realization, understanding of all other provisions. These principles are principle of non-discrimination, the best interest of the child, respect for the views of the child, right to be heard, child participation, and principle of survival and development. So these are very important provisions. And then the weight that is given to expression of views of children, as well as the right to be heard, is the recognition of this right as one guiding principle. Of course, there are also other rights that are necessary to exercise such right. This will include right to thought, conscience and religion, right to association, right to peaceful assembly, protection of privacy and access to information, which are also provided from Article 13 to 17. Of course, special support for disability children, as well as the provision of education, are also important provisions under Article 23 and 29, which are relevant to the realization of such right, and also to create conducive environment. Of course, in a nutshell, because I also have been interchangeably using the term, so this broader category, broader conceptualization of such right would somehow generally be termed as child participation. This is not a single term, but there is the expression of views, right to be heard, access to information, as I stated earlier, all together can be termed as child participation. When you see the framing of Article 12(1) of the UNCRC, it provides that state parties shall ensure that children who are capable of forming their own views shall be given the right to express their views in all matters affecting them, and their views should be given due weight. So when you see the freedom of expression in other contexts from the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, of course, freedom of expression is there, but the component of giving due weight, or the right to be heard, is not provided. This is a very unique framing in the context of child expression. And there is also, the article also provides the criteria for weighting children's participation. Accordingly, the weight can be based on the age and maturity of the child. Of course, age might not be very difficult to ascertain, especially in the presence of birth certificate. Of course, in some instances, that might not be the case, particularly in many African countries where there is low birth registration rate. But the most contentious part of weighting children's viewer expression of their views would be assessing their level of maturity. So as Lansdowne expressed, children with the same age may demonstrate different levels of maturity because of their exposure, information, environment, social, cultural attributes. So, you know, as many child participation guidelines provide, then every child participation and then weighting of a child's view should be undertaken case by case. Review needs to be undertaken case by case in order to ascertain maturity of the child. So as a guidance, you know, whether a given country has fulfilled its obligation to ensure that children can effectively express their views, or these are some of the indicators. One is institutional setup. Whenever you talk about institution, then there should be effective coordination among them as well. So setting up of institution as well as coordination is important, ensuring whether such component is available, putting in place laws, policies, practice to ensure that child participation is properly implemented. There should be, goals need to be set, and then indicators of progress should be identified as well. So participation modalities as well needs to be put in every sector, because children's engagement is not restricted in a a single entity, but in all sectors, administrative, legal, community, schools, in every sector, children somehow get involved and engaged. So in every sector, there should be a modality to ensure children's participation. This also takes into account the intervention and the protection dimension undertaken by civil society organizations as well. So limits to participation should be in line with international standards. So limits needs to be seen in a very restrictive manner. So, situations, conditions that somehow hinder children from effective communication and expression of their views should be addressed. Especially in Africa, there are a number of practices, values, cultures that may undermine the effective implementation of such rights. So those kind of barriers needs to be lifted. And always, whenever there is an implementation of or an undertaking or implementation of a given intervention, then there should always be a monitoring mechanism to ensure that the effectiveness of such intervention, as well as to identify gaps in the realization of such rights. So putting in place monitoring mechanism is also important, and it should be considered as well. So taking into account what is framed under the CRC, as well as the interpretation guidance set by the UN committee, as well as the African Committee of Experts, and then the practical engagements of many institutions like Save the Children, the types of participation can be categorized into three major components. The one is the consultation type, where adults seek children's views in order to build knowledge, to get information. In this regard, as an example, can be children's participation during the design or the writing of the compilation of the CRC or the ACRWC report, for instance. Research, different child-involved research and surveys, for instance, are undertaken through the consultative approach with children. The other dimension is collaborative participation, where there is a collaboration between adults and then children, and children would have the opportunity to influence the process as well as decision. So there are many initiatives which are, laid by adults, but with a very close and active engagement from children. There are a number of practices with the Save the Children. I know a number of engagements of the AfriChild, which are undertaken by active involvement of children. So this type of collaboration refers to that. Children's Aid, this is entirely aid administered by children with few support and facilitation by adults. Of course, as you would expect, older children may take the lead in this regard. There are a number of innovative engagements by children for us, for instance, to end child marriages in many countries, which are the initiative is being laid, facilitated, and owned by children themselves, and with very little or no involvement with adults, except facilitation or creating conducive environment for such participation. So, in a nutshell, the major types of collaborations are the following. Moving to insights from Ethiopia. When Claire made the opening, she indicated that the Ugandan constitution do not have a specific right on child participation. The same is true for Ethiopia. The constitution does not outline children's rights to expression of their views. and also to be heard and respected. But there is an explicit recognition of the principle of the best interest of the child, which can be commended, but it is very hard to realize such principle without ensuring the participation of children. You can't really ascertain or know what is in the best interest of a child without consulting, without discussing, without having an engagement with that child. So freedom of expression is an intrinsic component, an important component of the principle of the best interest of the child, but that's not somehow outlined under the Constitution. Unlike the Constitution, different subsidiary laws provide a number of norms regarding child participation. For instance, the revised family law of 2000 provides that in adoption, assignment of guardian, as well as custody cases, a child's views needs to be solicited. Of course, such discretion is given to the court, but in practice, courts solicit the views of the child in such cases. When courts deal with financial interests of a child, then as a matter of mandatory process, the courts need to solicit for the views of the child. Actually, they base their decision based on the interest and the expression of the child. But this is not an absolute arrangement. A child needs to be at least 14 years to express his views in his pecuniary interests. In the context of children coming in contact with the law, the Criminal Procedure Code provides that all the proceeding would be undertaken in an informal manner, and the person, the child in contact with the law should freely express the views. So this is also is one area that the children's participation is ensured. One intervention that has been underway since 2007 and is being scaled up is ensuring the participation of children using child structures such as child parliament, school clubs, and similar structures. Particularly, child parliament is being established across the country. There's also a guideline to it, which was adopted in 2017. This guideline somehow used as a tool to ensure child participation from the lowest administrative level, which is called Kabale in Ethiopian context, to the national level. So that hierarchy is there. There is also a school level child parliament, which is being established. Of course, the strengths, the active engagement of child parliament somehow differs from region to region and differs from the kind of support that they get from the government as well as non-governmental entities. But despite that, then in almost many areas across the country, child parliament structures are being established. I think 2 weeks ago, there was an election. The old parliamentarians ended with their term, and a new national election was being underway as well. So this is an area that somehow given focus by the government. According to Desalegn Barehe, who was the former president of the first Supreme Court, there have been a number of initiatives to ensure child participation as well as best interest of the child in the court setting. They developed different manuals and procedures to guarantee such right. Interviewing guides for psychosocial experts was also developed, and the psychosocial experts were not present in the court structure, but since 2015, they became part of the formal court structure. So that's a very commendable initiative as well. But however, even if these initiatives are encouraging, but there is stringent qualifications such as the criteria to note age, adequacy of experts, budget, infrastructure are serious challenges that affect the effective realization of such right. Of course, giving adequate weight to expression of children is also a challenge as well. In many areas, child participation is seen as a procedural safeguard rather than informing a final product. It's just seen as a process rather than influencing action as appropriate. But that's not the case in many instances. So that also needs to be addressed. Further, in different state reports and concluding observations of the committee, it has been noted that traditional and cultural attitudes are limiting factors for the effective implementation of such right. Of course, there is also limitation of data on how the right is implemented, how child participation is implemented, not only in the judiciary, but also in schools, administrative processes, alternative care settings, and so also in the family and also in the community. So if you try to look for a data, then you definitely will not find anything. That the same can be true for many African countries as well. As a way forward, first there should be a consensus and a commitment to see that working with adults is as important as working with children. So working with children is important. That needs to be acknowledged, and there should be a commitment for following that. Capacity building for all stakeholders. Child participation requires time, money, knowledge, and skills. So there should be enough investment in this regard by the state as well as non-state actors. So mainstreaming of child participation in every sector. In the context of Africa, family and community structures are important. So for these, laws, policies, guidelines are important as appropriate. Of course, awareness raising, networking, and advocacy is also another important to ensure child participation. So child structures, child-focused organizations also needs to be supported because they are the organization, the entities that directly work with children. And also the child structures are also an important structures to ensure for this right. So to address lack of data as well as to ensure regular progress of intervention, then there should be regular monitoring of the different initiatives. And yeah, with that, I end my presentation. Thank you for your attention. I hope I haven't used more of your time as well. So back to you, Claire. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mulatu. Thank you very much for that very deep, rich, and insightful presentation on child participation and the tensions inherent therein. You raise very important tensions. In the interest of time, I'm going to request our participants to type their questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We will get to them. I would like to introduce our next speaker, who's going to give us more experiences on working on actually making this child participation come to life. So thank you very much, Dr. Mulatu. We appreciate your sharing. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker. From the grassroots spaces to the corridors of the UN, Sophia is a champion for the voices of girls and young women, challenging those in power to bring about structural change to stop child exploitation. In her role as the She Leads Uganda country coordinator for Terre des Hommes, Netherlands, or what many of you know as TDH, she engages daily with child and youth participation in child protection. As a young advocate herself, she has been part of the Kampala Advocacy Network and Youth Advisory Panel, who reviewed Uganda's National Adolescent Policy, School Health Policy, and Sexual Offences Bill. She's currently pursuing a master's degree in Gender Studies at Makerere University. Sophia, it's a real pleasure to have you. For the next 10 minutes, she'll be speaking to us about insights from her experience. Thank you, and over to you, Sophia.
Thank you very much. I am going to request, is Clinton online so that it's able to support me in presenting? Or I can
Yes,
share
it's
my...
on. Clinton, kindly share the slides.
Oh, let me share. It's okay.
Okay.
Are you able to see?
Yes, please put in slideshow. Good. We can see your slides now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. Nabu Kenya Sophie once again, Country Consortium Coordinator, she leads. So I am going to share about the child and youth participation in advocacy for protection. And this is a retrospective study that was conducted in 2023. So about Terredizom Netherlands. Terredizom Netherlands in Uganda works to stop and prevent child exploitation. And over the past decade, we've had several projects that have engaged in participation of girls and young women in advocacy, including the She Leads program that I coordinate. So this presentation shares findings of a retrospective study that asked participants for their experiences and perspectives on their participation using the Londwe model of child participation as a framework. So the objective was to gain insight of child and young people's experiences in engaging with TDHNL and partners in influencing work for a decade, and to analyze and reflect on TDHNL's and partners' good practices and lessons learned with regard to child participation in influencing work, but also to shape evidence-based recommendations aimed at promoting and solidifying good practices, as well as guiding TDHNL and partners in ensuring that youth engagement is more meaningful, strategic, and impactful. So about the She Leads program that I coordinate, She Leads is implemented in a consortium of 5 globally, but in Uganda we are only 3. That is Terredizom Netherlands, which is the lead coordinating agency in Uganda, Plan International and Femnet. We have those implementing partners. They are 7 implementing partners, implementing in 8 districts. Back to the study, we employed, during data collection, we employed desk review and semi-structured interviews. And in the desk review, we reviewed internal sources of the Girls Advocacy Alliance project documents, the Down to Zero She Leads Mika and Image project. We also, for the semi-structured interviews, we did interviews with young adults who participated in the She Leads influencing work. These were part of our programs, as well as TDH partners and staff involved in advocacy. And these were in 4 countries, that is India, Kenya, Thailand, and Uganda, but also 32 girls and young women, as well as 30 practitioners. So basically for this research, I will talk about the experiences of Uganda, much as the research was done in those 4 countries. So this research applies the Landi model of child participation, and this talks about space. And by space, we are looking at providing safe and inclusive opportunities for children to express their views. The voice, providing appropriate information and facilitating children to express their views. It also goes ahead to examine the audience, whereby that listens to children's views. So we believe that children's views should be listened to, as well as influence, whereby children's views should be taken seriously and acted upon as appropriate. So I will not, in an interest of time, I'll not speak about the voice and space. So I'll concentrate on audience and influence. So these are the findings. So in regard to audience, as shared earlier, here we look at the audience in which the girls and young women or the young people do their advocacy. And in this, we emphasize, the research emphasizes that these these issues should be listened, the children's issues should be listened to. And by this, we work with local we work with stakeholders at local level, and these are community leaders, religious leaders, teachers, the civil society organization, the media, and opinion shapers at sub-national level, or what you call as the sub-county level. We, as the She Leads program, work with mayors, district officials, as well as provisional authorities, and at national level, the Uganda Women Parliamentary Association, the Uganda Youth Parliamentary Association, and the Uganda Children's Parliamentary Association, as well as different MDAs, those are ministries, departments, and agencies. And at regional level, it is the regional intergovernmental organizations like the African Union, the East African Community, IGAD, which is the Intergovernmental Agency on Development, as well as at the global level, we mainly concentrate on the human rights mechanisms and UPR, CSW, and yes, human rights mechanisms. So in the findings of the study revealed that children and young people felt listened to and taken seriously, mainly at really subnational and local levels. I've described those levels and the stakeholders at that level. And according to the She Leads midterm review report, in every She Leads country, girls and young women's groups who are increasingly being invited by local leaders and politicians to present their views and advise on local policies and bylaws. I can attest that for now, as per now, from 2021 to date, She Leads, we've worked on over 50 ordinances and resolutions in the communities. And in this, we've seen young people, being active, but also the local leaders showing initiative, inviting the young people to these meetings, telling them that this is a resolution that we need to work together with you. So there's a lot of really will at local and subnational level. And this has enabled us really being able to push for policy advocacy and influencing. As one of the respondents of the study indicated, that at the local level, government officials are listening to us and always call us to get our opinions on issues in the community. So that attests what I've been sharing earlier on. But then there's a discrepancy when it comes to the national, regional, and global levels. Children and young people felt that their voices were less heard and taken seriously at those higher levels. And one of the respondents shared that it seems that parliamentarians never understood the reason for calling us for the young. Never understood the reason for calling for meeting us, the young people. Therefore, one of them stated, mentioning that we should be in school instead of having such engagements. So I can relate to this finding. I remember we had an engagement with the Uganda Women Parliamentary Association, and this is a body that brings together all women parliamentarians. Of course, we work with children and young people, and we had to take them in order to do our policy influencing around various bills that were tabled in Parliament, among which is the marriage bill. You had what came through, and the rest of the bills, the nutrition bill, and so on. So, and in our conversation with the members of Parliament, I mean, the discussion was when the girls started holding the decision makers accountable, the response was that you need to be in school. I mean, why are you here in the first place? So, so when we referring to the Landi mode of child participation, we need these views to be listened to. But then what is the audience saying? The audience says, you don't need to be in Parliament, you need to be in school. Yeah, so still the research revealed that at regional and global levels, children and young people's influencing work has been challenged by several factors, and this include limited spaces. As you are aware, when it comes to spaces, especially at global level, the cost of even engaging one person is quite heavy. And if we are to look at issues around representation, it's even quite more complex, because if we need to get children or young people, creating a balance of them being represented, it becomes even more harder. So then we run short of underrepresentation of children and young people in regional spaces because of mainly the costs, but also the spaces being limited. And then another issue is around lack of meaningful participation that came through as the meaningful participation of children and young people. So some audiences engage children in an ad hoc and often tokenistic manner. So with this, I'll also cite some of the examples from She Leads, but also as a person who has engaged with young people in those forums at global, regional, and global and regional levels. You realize that, let me give you an example. It's a children's conference. Usually there are those conferences, that there is one going to happen in South Africa next year. So when you hear children's conference, I mean partners really hurriedly say, oh, where are the children? How can we get them to participate? So they pull them to participate, and the children most of the times are not even aware of, of how are we even engaged, at what level do we even know what the theme of the conference is, or what are we really talking about in this meeting. So that's really tokenistic engagement of children and young people. You just bring them on to participate in these events without clear explanation of, clear but also meaningful participation of these young people. And then the ad hoc comes in when we just, a bit of it comes in when we just get these children to participate in just a one-off. You have, let me say, Youth Day engagements, and you're like, oh, every year we celebrate the International Youth Day. Why not bring youth on board? Colorful. They give them T-shirts, they make the event colorful, and then it's a one-off and it's done. And then I think we also have a tendency of bringing these youth on board, but in a way of, we also need other young people to participate. Oh, let me say, Rebecca, you've participated this how many times, so let me also bring another person to participate. So because we want to be more representative, we also face a challenge of lifelong learning, continuity, because you bring this one and then you change because you want at least the youth from Karamoja to be represented, and then the youth from the East, and then, that continuity, sustainability is not there. So engaging youth in a ad hoc way also came through in our research. And another is complexity of decision-making processes. I personally have participated in a number of global engagements together with young people, but then last year I was in Geneva for the Human Rights Council, but then you realize that the language being used, the level of diplomacy at that level is quite different. If it can shock me as a person engaging at that level, well, what about these children who we probably get from the remotest of the remotest villages to be in such spaces? So the processes are quite complex. The language, I remember in those meetings we had, Nigeria and Egypt were arguing on whether it should be inclusion or diversity. So some would identify more with inclusion and another with diversity. So, if someone doesn't even understand the English and they need to be translated, to need these conversations to be translated in their local languages, this usually becomes a bit hard, even especially with the use of technical terms. It makes really the engagement of young people very, very complex. So the next component is influence on the Landry model. And in this, we are looking at the views of children being acted upon by targeted audiences. So we've seen the audiences. We've talked about our issues. At the floor of Parliament, in Geneva, in different spaces. But at what level do we see these issues being acted upon? So the reports indicated that at local and subnational levels, children and young people felt that their engagement was successful and impactful. They felt that the target audiences acted upon their views and recommendations and informed them about what was done. So as the report, the Girls Advocacy Alliance Learning Review Report 2021 indicated that majority of the youth advocates were engaged at community level, and this is where young people felt that they were able to have the most impact influencing their peers, religious leaders, and other key stakeholders. So it is at that local level where the children felt, and the young people, young women. Sorry, I work with young women, so that comes through strongly. Yeah, children and young people felt that, their views were acted upon and taken seriously. What happens when we go to the other levels? Yeah, so before a youth respondent in our study indicated that at our district or local level, we were able to follow up and know what happened. So, they were able to engage and know what happened at the district level. But then at national, regional, and global level, the story is different. Children and young people felt that they were provided with very limited or no information or updates following their influencing contributions or interventions. They also felt that some of the targeted decision makers ultimately did not take action upon their views and recommendations. And for those that really engage at that level, for partners that engage at that level, I know you can identify with this finding, because for many cases, like I've recently participated in the COP Conference of Parties 29 that took place in Azerbaijan, but then you realize that yes, after all these conversations, after all these panel discussions that we engage the young people in, after the bilateral meetings with different countries, and what happens? Do we even get that time to give feedback as staff to the young people in whatever conversations or discussions they've been up to? So majority of us fall victim of not even giving feedback. What happens is that the conversations really remain within us. And as a youth respondent in the study said that, however, at national, regional, and regional level, there is usually no feedback provided. So we've usually attend those youth Pan-African summits at that level, the East African community meetings. At what level do we give feedback to the young people? Because it's important if young people are to feel that their views are acted upon. So otherwise, they would feel that they are being used. So that is where you hear such statements. So another youth respondents in our study indicated that these delegates also do not provide feedback to those that send them. And also when followed up, we find that they take no action after the engagements. So this youth respondent says that even after, they themselves have participated in those engagements, feedback to their fellow youth or girls and young women becomes very difficult. And I think as she leads, we also faced that in the first and second year before we came up with the mechanisms on how we can give the peer-to-peer feedback mechanisms. And I will not talk about the last view. I'll go straight to the recommendations. What did the study recommend? So after all that, the study recommends that TDH builds on the past achievements and successes, and may invest in additional resources to solidify and increase the scope of engagement to ensure systemically safe, I will bold systemically safe, meaningful, and empowering and impactful engagement. So if we of course, if we are to engage, like I shared before, we need resources. So if we are to even widen the scope of engagement, we need to invest more into resources. But also another recommendation was to ensure impact on a more larger scale with the ambition of creating systemic change to stop child exploitation enshrined in the TDH Listen Up strategy. There should be linkages between the engagements of children and young people at local, subnational levels with higher levels, such as the national, regional, and global levels. I think that's a work in progress on our end as she leads. We are trying to ensure that those linkages are there. We've created the National Girls Desk to ensure that all the information trickles down, to ensure that there are those linkages. The girl from Bujiri representing girls and young women at the global level is able to trickle down that information to the girls down there, but also the stakeholders also get to know what happens at different levels. Another recommendation is that TDH NL and partners should continuously and actively engage with and for children and young people. Yeah, so that continuous engagement is what the report recommended, and it also appreciates that the processes are complex and lengthy and often non-child friendly. But also policy and legislative reform processes are key elements in achieving the systemic change to stop child exploitation. So for us, it is the policy, because if we do a lot of awareness in the communities and you don't get that awareness into policy, how then are we going to be sustainable? How are we creating systemic change? So it means that we need to have that continuous active engagement with and for the children. And another recommendation is that TDHNL partners carefully assess and prioritize national, regional, and global opportunities for children to directly participate in influencing platforms or decision-making processes. And this, I will quote one of the engagements we had with young people. They said they do not want to get a cake in the confectionery. Like they want to be part of the entire process of selecting the ingredients, being part of the cake, getting all those colors together, so, and being part of the entire process. Yes. So, and doing it continuously. Yes. As an option to direct participation, if that fails, if we fail to get the girls or the young women or the young people into those spaces at national, regional, and global level, then what do? We suggest that young people can have their voices heard without not being physically present, but through other mechanisms like sharing videos. I think we did this during the Human Rights Council. We couldn't get all the young people, but we recorded videos that were shared in the plenary in Geneva, and other people were able to listen to them. But also use of traditional social media. You know how media is really a strong tool for advocacy, and the traditional means we can have those megaphones that they use in the communities. The displaying of the posters, the exhibitions, but also developing advocacy briefs to share with relevant audiences. You well know that evidence-based advocacy is the way to go. Without data, my previous speaker talked about the issue of data. That is, the report recommends that we develop more briefs so that the audiences are well equipped with information. This should be translated, they should be contextualized, but also they should respond to the needs of the local communities. And finally, it is very important to ensure that children involved in advocacy work receive regular feedback about decisions made on their input. This is very important, and they are informed if no action is taken by responsible parties. Yeah, so regular feedback is needed. And as I conclude, I would like to emphasize that advocacy is not a one-day journey. It is not. It is a process, and it takes time and patience. I'll give you an example of the Girls Advocacy Alliance. There is the Child Protection Ordinance that was advocated for about 5 years back when the Girls Advocacy Project was there. But now under the She Leads, we had to pick that up and continue with it. So it's a journey, and it's a tiring. It needs patience and time, but it's the collective efforts of us all, the dedicated individuals, that can make a significant impact. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Thank you for sharing what Terre des Hommes is learning with the She Leads initiatives and other related pieces. I'm also aware that Terre des Hommes is launching a course very soon on child participation. So participants, look out for that course. We'll be happy to share more information on our platforms once it's up and running. Thank you for sharing and complementing what the good professor shared earlier. Now, without wasting more time, I would like to introduce our third speaker, who will quickly, in about 5 to 7 minutes, talk to us, share some of their experiences as well. Mr. Geoffrey Nsubuga-Simbwa is the Executive Director of Somero Uganda, an NGO that promotes and protects the rights of vulnerable children and young women through education, skills development, and health promotion. With extensive experience in child rights advocacy, He's an ILO National Master, Scream trainer, and external collaborator on the Scream methodology, which he's going to tell us about, aimed at empowering children and youths to champion children's rights and combat child labor. He has contributed to the development of specialized Scream modules, including those addressing child labor in HIV and AIDS contexts and armed conflict. Geoffrey has been instrumental in shaping Uganda's National Action Plan on Child Labor and the Child Labor Policy. We are happy to have you, Geoffrey. Please take it away.
Thank you. I am happy to be here. I request the host to share my presentation. Again, my name is Subuga Geoffrey, the Executive Director of Somero Uganda, and I've been in the area of child participation for long, especially when it comes to issues of child labor. Somero Uganda, just to the many who know it, is currently rebranding to take on a name, Somero Development Initiative. So soon you'll be seeing us as Somero Development Initiative. We are working currently in 12 districts, and we are trying to ensure that children and rights of young women are protected. I bring to you a perspective of a local organization implementing issues of children at a local community, and what our journey has been since we started. Next slide. So we start right away with what we think child participation is, and I won't spend a lot of time on this because many presenters have talked much about this. But anyway, we look at child participation as interactions with children and youth. And when children have an opportunity to express themselves and their views, their views are respected and taken on. And when the decisions are based on their views. Next slide. So children have a right to campaign and influence change. We believe that they understand matters of their own and they want to get engaged. They want to get engaged, they want to change, they want to act, they want to talk. They are actors in their own development and they are not passive recipients. They help deliver better decisions on matters that concern them, and more relevant, better solutions. Next. So you find that a reason as to why Somero is concentrating on child participation. Somero is working in two different dimensions. The first are the slum areas. And the context of children in the slum areas, they are seen by the community in a different perspective. The community has painted that children who have grown in the slum areas know a lot of information. So they think everything is known to them. And you find that even when parents or youth give birth, they are already naming them criminals. To a boy, they will say, I've given birth to a criminal, a hooligan. And to the girl, they will think they have given birth to a prostitute. So before they even start moving, they think they already know some acts, and they are looked at in such a way. So the society puts a lot of pressure on them as they are expected to to curb down the acts that they have. And in the way, there is violent communication, and children's feelings and acts are suppressed in such a way that even when they stand up to say something, they do not want them to say, because they think they are criminals, they are prostitutes, they are hooligans. They get exposed to certain activities like labor at an earlier age. And in houses, they are even forced to go and fetch for income without any platform to express their feelings. We, however, work also in the rural areas. And in the rural areas, our culture is very strong. And you know, with our culture, you are not supposed to talk as a child. You are not supposed to interact with adults. So the platform for children to express themselves is really lost. The audience is not there. So with such kind of a context, we then come up and say, how do we support children to participate? Next. So child participation forms the journey of Somero. We have struggled to go through the different types or the different levels. As Fasila has explained them, I won't dwell much on them, but we've tried to come through participation, where children are just provided space and opportunities to initiate activities. They are just consulted, ideas are there, and I think most of the participants, most of the stakeholders are stuck here. Children are participating, but they are participating probably on the views of what adults think. Children's ideas are identified and taken on by the adults, and the children are nowhere to be seen. And if they come up, then they are not in position to express themselves fully. We have also moved to consultative participation, where just seeking children's views is the order of the day. Then the adults initiate, the adult initiated and they are adult initiated and managed, and may or may not involve sharing decision making with children. We have also moved to collaborative participation, where we are now engaging children as partners. We are looking at adults at the same level, and children are initiating initiatives. They are involved in all spheres, and they empower. It empowers children to influence or challenge processes and outcomes. So our journey has been on and off throughout these all levels. It is not easy to maintain yourself at the apex, but at least we are trying to see that we have a collaborative environment with children. Next. We have employed a number of approaches. One that I was introduced by is the SCREAM methodology. SCREAM is the child labor, child participation module that takes a number of modules that have been developed over time. SCREAM is supporting children's rights through education, the art, and the media. And this emphasizes that, one, empower the children with education, two, use creative artistic methodologies to let them open up or scream up, and provide a platform for the children. This we have worked with Teledes Homes, we have worked with the ILO and other partners to ensure that children participate fully. Then the child-friendly accountability. It is an approach that helps children 13 to 17 years to actively participate meaningfully in making certain decisions that can change and protect them. Accountability aims to see that children hold stakeholders accountable of their commitments. We have also employed the child-to-child approach. This is mainly a Kyambogo University approach that we are seeing to be helpful when children are working together. Currently, we are also looking at the Real Fathers approach. Real Father is looking at children between the age of 0 to 3 years and how these children can be in position to participate, to communicate, and their voices are listened to and they are acted upon. So these are approaches that we have formed our journey. Next. How have we promoted child participation? We have employed a number of avenues, but one to add on the network and the wider base of adults who are supporting child participation is we do a lot of trainings for school administrators and the entire school. Here we have employed the whole school approach to see that right from the teacher, right from the gatekeeper to the administration of the school, all these are involved fully. And they have MOU that we are working with them just as a commitment to see that children are engaged. In schools, we have also formed clubs, child rights clubs all over, next, that are also helping us a lot to push this agenda. Next. We have created safe spaces in schools and out of schools and around the 12 districts we are working in. Currently, we have 58 safe spaces. These children feel safe to interact with each other, and they act as platforms for them to even share their ideas with adults. So in these safe spaces, district leaders consult children, interact with children, children come up with ideas to implement in the community and so on. There are trainings of children on child protection laws, policies, their roles and responsibilities. And for now, we have trained over 10,000 children across the country, both in and out of school, just to have a wider base of the children who can stand and advocate on their own issues. Next.
Geoffrey, could you kindly summarize?
Okay.
Thank you.
We have promoted child participation still through training children on advocacy, child-led advocacy. We have had some child-led action research and developed advocacy papers, statements, charter of demands, and so on. And these have been presented to the parliament and different stakeholders. Can you also be a bit fast? So different platforms still have also, we have also engaged children and provided platforms for children. We are working with UCRNN to see that children voices are submitted to the CRC or through the alternative report. We have also launched the Plight of Boys Child National Campaign with support of partners to mentor boys and male engagement. You know that right now boys need attention, so we have come in also to look into that. Advocated for safe spaces in schools, and the declaration of safe space, safe schools. We have also put in ideas of children. What are we learning? In all this one, if we are to engage children, you need to be non-judgmental. You need to have a non-judgmental mind. You have to create safe and secure spaces for them to share out their ideas. But most importantly, please, if you do not have time, don't start engaging children. Child participation needs when you have time. If a child comes to you and you are on phone, if a child comes to you and you seem to be busy, you're not giving a child attention, then you are chasing this child away and he or she will never come back in such a space. It's good to follow up on commitments as you make commitments to children. Also follow up to see whether they received what you actually meant. Child-led representation is easily embraced if children are involved in coming up with it rather than just having children engaging. I want to pick up one which has been prominent, that giving feedback to children is very important. So please ensure that children receive feedback in child participation engagements. Next. These are some of the things where we have evidently engaged children. They popularized child labor policy. It was thoroughly done by children. The child participation strategy. This is now being implemented by AMPCAN, but at a national level. The Busia Education Ordinance, the Child Participation Ordinance of Bujiri Education Ordinance, there has been child and disability research by Chambogo University. Children have been there. The international, we have had a number of international conferences where children have been engaged, and a number of them. And we have shared with you some videos that shows children engagement and children voices and their experiences in this. Next. There are barriers. Yes, there are barriers as we are doing this at local level. Insufficient comprehension of the concept of participation among different stakeholders. Everyone looks at it at a different way. Some of us are looking at it as a token. We are thinking that we are giving children a token rather than real meaningful participation. Adults are biased. There's still a lot of bias, mainly because of culture. There's inadequate expertise and resources to execute child participation effectively. Children are notified about matters that impact them, but they are not fully involved. The status of children in the society is still looked differently. They are unable to access decision-making channels. Sophia has talked about it. You find that, yes, at a local level, there's much that is being done, but go to the national level, it is really hard. There's lack of ability to engage effectively, and they do not know what advocacy entails or how to participate. So there's all about this confusion, and this is hindering our participation, our implementation on ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. Thank you for taking us through what Somero has done. It's amazing work. It's incredible work. And I'm encouraging participants to reach out to the different panelists to follow up on in case of any questions and in case of the need to collaborate. We are so happy to have all these three rich presentations today. In the interest of time, we are 1 minute over time. This webinar starts at 3 and ends at 4:30. I don't see many questions. There was one question for Dr. Fasil. So I will have Dr. Fasil Mulatu respond to that one, and then we'll wrap up. But once again, I see people are dropping off already. We want to thank you before you drop off. Thank you for sticking with us throughout the year. Some of you have attended all our webinars, all our monthly webinars since this year started. This is our last webinar for the year. And we are privileged that you could make the time to join us. So let's take that one question to Dr. Mulatu, and I see Rogers Golova, a champion of children in our government, online as well, with a few things to say. So let me start with Rogers, and then we will get to Dr. Fasil to respond to the question. Rogers, over to you. Please unmute, or the host help Rogers unmute to speak. Thank you. Clinton, can you help Rogers to unmute?
Yes, thank you so much, Claire, and the AfriChild team for convening such a very important discussion on child participation. I think it is also right that we also get a chance to share our views. It's good that we've had the submissions of the people that we work with in elevating the voices and the views and the values that children have at national but also subnational level. My submission is really around us as the Ministry of Gender addressing some of the bottlenecks that have been identified. First, at micro level, you know, that child participation obviously is built from households and comes up to institutions where the children are. We've seen that children in school participate more than those out of school because the platforms for them, the agency is already built, but also the exposure to having open discussions is much more profound. So we also visibly identify challenges for engaging out of school children, because obviously, even when CDOs try to mobilize them, they do feel that we are not giving them an honest platform for them to discuss issues. But they also feel that it's also illegal to be out of school. So maybe they think that when we try to onboard them, we are trying to kind of get them either reprimanded or arrest their parents. So they are sort of a bit wary when we try to engage them. On the whole, I would like to say that Ministry of Gender is committed to fulfilling all our responsibility when it comes to child participation, as espoused in the National Child Policy 2020. We have a strong pillar for child participation, pillar 4, and we have identified a number of things that we can do. One of the 3 things that we are going to do briefly that I will share with you is that starting next month, I know some members here are already aware, we have convened a technical working group which is going to oversee 3 key tasks. One is to revise the National Child Participation Guide, which is dated 2009. It's already past its due date. The other is to develop standard operating procedures for engaging children. And lastly, but most importantly, is working with Ministry of Public Service to develop a training manual for public officials on child participation in decision-making processes. So those are the 3 key areas that we are going to focus on between now and June next year. And we believe that together with your support, we shall be able to address some of the lacunas that the presenters, the excellent panelists, have been able to share. Over to you, our moderator.
Thank you very much, Rogers. It's always an honor to have you listen in and share those insights and what our government is doing. Like I said, the commitment is clear in some of the frameworks we have, that our government is committed to promoting or putting in place measures to support child participation. And what Rogers has shared speaks to that. So Dr. Fasil, are you able to respond to that one question? Thank you very much, Rogers. The question
okay, I think a little more clarity would help to provide a comprehensive response. But you know, just to have a general reflection. Of course, there are a number of challenges as well as opportunities brought by globalization. But I think the person that posed the question highlighted on the challenges. So of course, you know, information is coming from different end. Accessibility of information is there. Children access various information. Why that might not be in line with their rights and interests, and at times they can also adversely affect their growth, development, as well as their interest. However, I would like to stress on formal education, parenting, the contribution of the community, as well as local NGOs and actors to somehow influence the different modalities by which children receive information, and help them to also filter some of it. Yeah. In the current context, we can't really escape global influences, be it globalization or technology, and other current developments. What we can really do is strengthen our institution, our community engagements, so that we can always mitigate the adverse effects of current contemporary challenges such as globalization. Of course, for local actors as well, the current global funding shock might also have an adverse contribution as well, because as I indicated in my presentation, ensuring child protection would necessarily require adequate funding, adequate engagement. But still, local resources, local engagement, local knowledge becomes handy in that regard, not only for this, but also to ensure that Africa somehow liberates from any kind of external influences as well. That might be idealistic, but I think that's the only choice that we have to strengthen our local institutions and to also strengthen our intercontinent engagement in every sector. So if you ensure that, then you can somehow define your priorities and also mitigate the impacts. Of course, as I indicated before, some impacts, because you can only mitigate them, but you can't entirely protect yourself from such global impacts. But we can by using such modalities, we can always mitigate the impacts as well. Back to you, Claire.
Thank you very much. We are almost 10 minutes over time, so we'll bring this to a close. In summary, we've had the theoretical underpinnings of child participation, the different provisions for child participation at global, regional, and at national level for Ethiopia and for Uganda. We've got some insights from people that are actually implementing child participation initiatives. She leads, she brought in a component of moving from tokenism to meaningful participation. And our last speaker also brought some real life examples of policies and actions that have been informed by children. My takeaway from this is that although there are inherent tensions, for example, sometimes to protect the best interest of the child would mean making a decision on behalf of the child, which would then contravene the principles of child participation. The more we talk about them, the more we unpack them and realize that those are realities we live with, the more we are able to rethink our initiatives and see where we have disempowered children in our bid to protect them, where we have instead disempowered them and limited their ability to participate in matters that affect them. I encourage all of us to become champions of child participation in our different environments. Rogers brought in the component of at home. We treat our children as passive beings, and then at 18 throw them into the world, and suddenly they're expected to make decisions, and they haven't practiced decision making and playing an active role in their own lives. So I think it begins with all of us in whatever spaces we are, in research, in every space we are, to create the room for children to participate within their evolving capacities. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar next year. Feel free to reach out to us, and this recording will be available on our website. Have a good evening, a good morning, depending on where you are. Bye.